died 6 months before I was born. And my mother was on the homestead in Winnet, 3 miles out of Winnet. And, so when I came along, she had already had my 3 sisters in the homestead, and she had come from Minneapolis. So she went back to drop me in Minneapolis, and then she came back to the homestead a couple months later. By chance, we ended up in this place. It was almost by accident. In 1935, we moved up here from the family. My mother was a widow. We moved up here in 1935, and those were the terrible, tough years: 35, 36, 37, 38. I walked to high school 3 miles down here. They were terribly cold. And it was a depression. We couldn't have been poorer. We couldn't have been more hard up. And especially since this is February today, that's why I have this complex about February. Because in February of 1936, it turned terribly cold. I mean, it hit 50 below zero, but it hardly got above zero for the entire month of February 1936. And this winter had followed one of the driest summers that we'd ever had in 1935. And the only hay we had was we'd mowed some Russian thistles and a few weeds and things like that. And this is what we had to feed our milk cows. Was the only thing we had. And the only livestock we had was a few milk cows. At that time, I used to sell a little bit of milk in Grass Range. I used to carry it on my back and pedal 10 or 12 quarts of milk in Grass Range for 8 cents a quart. That's how I went through high school, made my way through high school. It was my supplement to the family income. And one of my sisters died in 1936. And so I don't like to talk about the dirty 30s. I was probably one of the luckiest soldiers in World War II there is. I didn't force anything. I just drifted. I just went where they told me to go. This is where I got started in art a little bit. Was in the Army. First I went down to a USO in Salt Lake City, and I did a copy of a Rembrandt's mother. I didn't know I could paint, but found out I could. I always knew I could draw a little bit, but I didn't know that had anything to do with art. And what I didn't know at that time is anything about design. I didn't know anything about it. But anyway, they put me on an MP unit, and I MP'd trains from out of Salt Lake City, or not necessarily just troop trains, but all the passenger trains in Salt Lake and L.A. and Salt Lake and San Francisco, Salt Lake and Denver, even came into view. But anyway, I got to know all the black porters at that time and all the waiters, and it was very hard to find a place to sleep on those trains or get something to eat during the war. They were completely full. So anyway, for some reason I started to do drawings, little portrait sketches of all the black porters and all the black waiters. So then they made up these hospital units. So I was in the general hospital unit, which includes, probably 150 personnel, all the way from doctors, nurses, to plumbers, and painters, and so forth, and one refrigerator mechanic. And then we ended up in Glasgow and hung around there for 5 or 6 weeks, and they trained us into somewhere in the south of England and put us on a ship. It took us a whole week to get across the channel because of the storm. For the first time I saw evidence of war, 1944 came into Le Havre, and there wasn't much left at Le Havre. And we sort of bivouacked outside in a little resort town called Etretat. And then all of a sudden they put us on a train, and they were sending us to set up a general hospital on the front. By that time, the army was between Paris and was at the Belgian border. And well, for some damn reason, the Germans thought that Eisenhower was in the train station in Paris. So they came over there and bombed it, you know, just a freak bombing. But it stopped our train, so we couldn't continue. And so for some reason, I don't know what happens, we set up our general hospital on the outskirts of Paris, in the suburb of Paris called Villejuif. We took over an insane asylum. They kicked out all the crazies and put us in. And that's our general hospital. And then so we set up our head there, so there I was right in Paris. Never planned to go there. But they didn't know what to do with me. They say, Stockton, you're supposed to be a refrigerator mechanic. Well, I said, I don't know a damn thing about refrigerator mechanic. I told them the story. They forgot to sign the instructor. And they said, well, what can you do? Well, I said, I can draw and I can paint signs. I knew they needed to paint signs, so they made me a sign painter. And they gave me a French sign painter to help me out. Later on, they gave me a German PW sign painter to help me out. And we had a lot of sign painters. But and I was in charge of some French painters there at the house, the ones that had been part of the insane asylum there. I was in charge of them, the house painters. And they were the ones that taught me about painting. And the knowledge I acquired there has helped me even to this day, because they taught me what paint was made of. They told me how to apply paint. They told me all the techniques of paint. They showed me all the kinds of the brushes you use to put on the paint. See, in the art schools, they don't teach you how to apply paint because they don't know how to apply paint. So I learned this from house painters and a sign painter. It's a hell of a good education. Oh, one of the house painters I was, who I worked with, and was taught me about paint. He invited me to a dinner party. And Melby was there at that dinner party. The first time I saw her, and the second time I remember seeing her. They had a dance at the hospital. We danced. The French girl, we brought over swing music. You know, we were jitterbuggers and all jitterbuggers. Poor little French girls had never seen it. See, they'd gone through the occupation, 5 years of the German occupation. They hadn't the faintest idea what went on in the world for 5 years. It completely blanked out. And so they are having a hard time catching up to catching up to the jitterbuggers from music. They adapted. So I guess it started from there. So I had to learn the French waltz. No, but our waltz was this waltz, you know, and this waltz. And then very slow like that, you know, and so forth. But the French waltz was a little faster, you know, and he went around and round and round and round. And a little bit different beat. What is a jitterbug tune? Yeah, you sing?
Oh, he used to be really good. And he was so skinny.
So we had to learn that, and they had to learn how to jitterbug. We made. First, we got married by the chaplain.
Yeah, they gave us a beautiful.
Yeah.
All the guys in my office, you know, at first they were against, but they checked up on it.
But that wasn't completely
make
legal
sure
to
it
get
was-
married only by a chaplain. in the army. So we had to go over and get married by the mayor. Who was the mayor? I'm the only American I know of who was married by a commie.
Yeah,
He was the communist mayor of Wheelersby.
Yeah.
Yeah. He still is, I guess. Unless he died, he was for a long time. What was his name?
I don't know. It's on my marriage certificate.
Yeah. We hadn't licked the Japs yet. It was 1945, and we were all getting ready, you know, and all over France there, and waiting for, and you know, as the rumor mill goes, you know, they were preparing us to ship us to Japan for the invasion of Japan, all of us, you know. And we were sweating that all out. And then they even talked about when they invade Japan, they expected at least 300,000 or 400,000 casualties. And that worked on your mind a bit, I guess. And then all of a sudden, someone dropped the bomb, and we didn't have to go. Then I was sent home, and well, 7 or 8 months later, she came over with that big goddamn monster of a baby. Jesus,
Yeah.
he'd weigh 10 pounds when he was born.
10.5.
She was a skinny little thing too, you know. I've painted every kind of sign. You know, I've painted gold leaf. I've done a lot of gold leaf. You know, I painted signs when I came back to the ranch here. I painted a lot of signs in Lewistown, and then one time I went to work for for a bulletin company up in Great Falls. I painted highway bulletins. I've painted stakes that are 12 feet long and
Portraits,
8 feet
yeah.
high. I painted some guy's portrait, which just his head, which is 8 feet high. His nose was that long.
I painted a great big ear one time.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah,
painted a
very
goddamn
good.
ear, that big one sitting there. Yeah. Oh no, but then I don't know, when I came back from out of art school in Paris, I was over there on the GI Bill, you know. Well, I went around to a couple sign companies, and they didn't want to hire me. They didn't need me. So I don't know why, but I decided for some damn reason or other to come back to the farm. So I came back.
Well,
And those years were awful tough. To learn and relearn agriculture was tough. It's a lot of people think we were just a bunch of dumb peasants. But farming and ranching is a very, very complex business. There's an awful lot of stuff you have to know. All the way from horticulture to carpentry work to working complex machines to veterinary business around animals. It's fantastic. You certainly can't learn it in school. You can't even really learn it in a lifetime. You sort of, in a lifetime, you can learn what not to do sometimes, and that's about all you ever learn about it. What not to do and what to guard against. It's a tough business. And that's a very strange thing. Environmentalists, you know, they hate our guts, but I don't know how in the hell they're going to replace us. No, I have a section, what they call it section, 640 acres. That's a very small ranch. I used to run 300 head of sheep. That was in Montana terms, that's not much of a herd. Mm-hmm. In terms of the French farmer, it's a hell of a herd. It's all relative. No, I didn't quite make a living as a farmer rancher, but so I worked on the side as a sign painter quite a bit, and I managed to sell a certain amount of art now and then, especially the stuff I did in welded metal sculpture. I finally collected enough money, you know, because we were always poor. I got $75, and I bought a second-hand arc welder, $75. And I started running beads with it, and I said, well, hell, one could make a sculpture of this. So I did. So
Have you seen it?
some of them are quite good, and most of them are sort of pot boilers. And I finally gave up. I got sick and tired of doing horses. Jesus God, so much you can say about a horse, you know. I did in sculpture quite a bit. I did biblical people, you know, and sold them to churches then. And I did St. Paul. I did Francis of Assisi, and a couple Christs.
Cain, you meant?
Rocky Mountain College has my best
You meant
Christ.
Cain.
I did Cain, things like that. Yeah.
And
And they all sold. And then these horses out here, finally I ended up here in hell. I didn't have any. So I went and bought one of them back. I paid twice as much as what I sold it for. I
Quick
mean,
question.
who in the hell would do that? You know? What I was grasping for was composition and design. This is what I didn't know. I didn't know what in the hell it was, and there wasn't any book I could find to tell me. I couldn't find a teacher who could tell me. I finally had to sort of figure it out on my own. I mean, the drawing part was never difficult. I don't know, for some reason I could always draw. But I was looking at Rembrandt's, some of the Impressionists before I went to art school, and there was something there besides just drawing. This is composition, of course. There's a design. This is what you see in a painting, what I see it. It's the only thing I see in a painting. It's what Matisse saw. It's line, form, and color. I don't see much more than that. Subject matter doesn't mean anything. They added, like Rembrandt, the attitude of the people is important. The attitude, but not the story. The story has nothing to do with it. It's the attitude. And this separates a great painter like a Rembrandt or a Degas from the common artist, a common illustrator. They're interested in the story. That's literature. Nowadays, in a lot of contemporary modern art, most of those people I think should be writers. They're not painters. They're telling stories. They're not. It's not a visual language. I don't think they're insensitive to design. I think everybody's insensitive to design if they are exposed in the right way, and if because I remember I substituted on Bozeman and I taught a class down there. I was teaching sculpture, but I had one class of home ec girls and a few boys in there learning elementary education, I guess, or something like that. I'd also taught privately, but I had discovered that what these people were very happy teaching those girls for the simple reason I was exposing them to the fact that they had a sense of design, something they were not aware of. And all of a sudden, they could create a design. They were sensitive to it. They had never known that before. The application of paint is very important. You take the average watercolors from those days, they had to have the right kind of paint, the right kind of brush, especially the right kind of paper, you know, to make these phony surfaces and so forth and such, and these phony edges, which is a nice, crisp watercolor. That's all bullshit. You have to create your own surfaces. This is what I didn't know. You have to know enough about applying paint to create your own surfaces. You don't allow the paper to do it. You don't allow the brush to do it. You have to do it. You have to know the necessity for it. The paintings fall to pieces because they don't know how to create a surface. We're sensitive to surfaces, like we're sensitive to cloth. The difference between wool and silk and things like that and textures. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have that,
it's everything.
It either gets too slick or it gets too rough or it's not composed. And then you know, recently during my career as a painter, they went to the hard edge, and that says nothing to me at all.
Yeah.
That says nothing to me at all. Because actually what one is painting, I think, it dawned on me. I mean, I searched for it for a long time until I finally found out how to do it. I probably don't do it right and should do it better, but at least I discovered something. We were painting air. We were painting a form in air. We were painting air, colored air. Air. It had to have air. Well, they've taken air out of painting now, even Picasso started taking air out. You paint things as if we're in a vacuum, without any light. And then it doesn't even cast a shadow. And this bothers me because maybe I'm rural. Maybe urban people don't like air. Maybe they don't like light. Maybe they don't like shadows. I don't know. Well, what Rembrandt was so good at is the fact all his life, you know, he lost his popularity as a portrait painter, and that how he had to make his living. He could cast too many shadows. Well, but all his life, he painted the same subject. He painted people, and he painted heads, and he did it very well. But all through a period of 40 years there, 40 years, he kept painting the head and portraits, but he always found something new to say about a head. Now, that's very, very difficult to do, because the average artist who goes off, and I did that too, goes off on these goddamn wild tangents, you know, to find something new to say. He didn't. He stayed with the people. That's why I admire him. I mean, this is where I finally understood what design was. This vast area of space and all these small little forms in the right space, and this great design of that, this great balance, this great grace of what is very large coming down to what is very small, and sort of peak. This is design. Yeah, that space, that. And Picasso was the complete opposite. He took space, and there's another place to put another form. And at one time in Picasso's career, during the Blue period, he used space a little bit. He never used it after that, except maybe just once in a while. But on the other hand, he had the talent of taking a lot of complex forms, a lot of complex color combinations, and putting them together and coming out with a harmony. So that was his bag. So maybe he was creating a different kind of a little space than Rembrandt was creating. But this balance of space is, well, that's the grace of a composition. Actually, Jackson Pollock didn't discover it. He discovered that he could paint a quilt on canvas and call it an easel painting, and it became modern art. Yeah, frankly, I mean, he wasn't thinking that way, but that's more or less what happened. Well, I mean, all through our history, we've had to repeat design on our fabrics, and we appreciate them as repeat designs. All Pollock did was to compose them, put them in an arrangement, and into a different arrangement, so to create a composition and create a melody. And I'll give you this quote before I forget it. Everything changes but the avant-garde. Well, when you're 30 years old and when you're 70 years old, there's a big difference in the way you think. You're more adventurous, you know. And I came out of art school. I hadn't painted anything. I hadn't painted anything. I made a couple paintings. I didn't know where to go, what to do, you know. And I painted realistic things. And yeah, he had all these movements in art. For the first in Minneapolis School of Art, they wanted to turn me into George Brock. I want to paint still life like George Brock. And so And in Paris, all I did was just draw and paint a few models and think and look, and I couldn't find a direction. I didn't know what the hell to do. And I came back to the ranch, and for the first 2 years I didn't do a damn thing, except walk. But then I'd already seen Pollock's stuff, and de Koonin's things, and so forth, and became very interested in the fact that they'd made me see things out there in this world and on that hillside out there that it never dawned on me before. Why in the hell of name of God do we have to paint what is panoramic? Why can't we paint things that are very close to us? And so, what is my interest in that hillside? I don't know yet. I finally came to an analysis. There's the textures and the patterns and the tones and the little shapes and so forth. That's why I like that hillside, which is just as interesting as a panorama. So I started to paint it and rearrange it and compose it and then put it into different rhythms. You know, the rocks and the brush, and put them into a different rhythm, and then exist there, which is an arrangement of what the composition is all about, to make it pleasant to look at, and make it interesting to look at. I was arranging rhythms, so then in that sense it's very much closer to music, because that's what I'm composing. I wasn't arranging forms, and I still don't. I still don't. Even in my latest things the latest things I painted with a little series on pine groves. It's all the same object. It changes rhythms, and as you look at it, sometimes you go like this, and sometimes you go like this. You know, yeah. I mean, art. It should be nothing more than visual music. It's a composition that our eye sees and doesn't go through our ear.